it's
Sure. Well, it's usually up to 3.
up to 3, okay. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to call this regular council meeting of Monday, February 24th, 2025 to order. And acknowledge with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. These people have been stewards of these lands and waters around Qualicum, Bowen Island for many, many years. The same agenda is our review who is present with the meeting at that table here. We have Councillor Jurgensen, Councillor Fast, Councillor Getty, our CAO Kern Dillon, our corporate officer Doki Atsuga, Councillor John Saunders, and on Zoom we have Councillor Wake. And Mayor Leonard sends his regrets, and he will be joining later on the meeting. The approval of the agenda, and I understand there's a page-long list of late items.
Yes, there were 15 letters received over the weekend, and they were all in support of item 10.3, which is the staffing proposal for the community center.
Thank you. So could I have a motion that council approve the agenda and on table items for the February 24th, 2025 regular council meeting? Thank you, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And public comments, we have, I think, 3 people signed up.
That's
And
right.
so perhaps 3 minutes each. And so we let Zoom go first or in person first?
Yep, Bruce Russell is first on the list, and he's joining us by Zoom.
Mr.
Hello?
Russell, you're unmuted. Are you ready to go? You have 3 minutes. And
Thank you very much. My name is Bruce Russell. I'm an 83-year resident of Bowen Island, residing at 303 Robert Road. I'd like to thank council for allowing me to speak and inviting Simon Gravel to speak to explain the Conservation Authority's rationale for their live and let live position on this serious matter of a cougar being on the island, which I find and many others find to be a very perplexing matter. Ours is a small island community and has an enviable predator-free reputation during my 83 years on the island, and I suspect that's probably a bit longer than that. And I think it's very important that we maintain it. As to living with the cougar, the safety and well-being of us residents and visitors is more important than the cougars. We should not be forced to live with the worrisome, abnormal situation of a predator. The immediate removal and relocation is in order, preferably alive before someone kills it, and more importantly, before it injures or kills a human being, in spite of the Conservation Authority's suggestion that that is highly unlikely to occur. After an incident is unnecessarily and avoidably, it's unnecessarily and avoidably too late for the authorities to admit to a mistaken judgment. I suggest one incident is far too many. If the cost of removal is an issue, I would be only too happy to work with a number of like-minded individuals to raise the money for the immediate humane removal, as we want to be part of the solution to the safe and satisfactory resolution to this matter. In conclusion, I urge council to request that the conservation authorities remove the cougar without delay. Let us not tempt fate. Thank you very much.
thank you. Anybody got any clarification for the speaker? Okay, moving on. Who's next on the list?
Next, we have in the room here, Paul Husin.
Hi, everybody. Been here a while. I'm speaking in support of the proposal, the staffing proposal for the performing arts facility at the new community center. This would be for the booking coordinator and a production and a program coordinator. I was a founding member of the Arts Council 38 years ago. And we founded that on the principle that we needed a performing arts space. Needed something, a larger gathering space so that we could present performing arts. And over the years, we've pursued that relentlessly, and here we are at the cusp of having the most amazing space around. And to make this space work, to have this space work effectively, we need to have staff that knows how to book the place, how to include the arts and all other constituencies in this community. And it has been a great fear of the arts community that we would not have the ability to have control over programming in this facility. The arts is very different from recreation facilities. Recreation programming, what it involves is its events. It's one-off. It's not like, 6 weeks of courses. What it is performance one night, coming back for weekends and so on and so forth. So what you need someone with experience in doing this. And the only way to do this, it can't be done with the staffing that you have at this present time. You have possibly adequate staffing for recreation and other stuff like that. But for the arts, you don't. You need someone who knows how to do that. And the proposal is very modest. The arts bought into this building with the community based on the fact that we would have control over this facility. We've contributed over $7 million to this facility. And the present staffing at the Hearth, at the Arts Council, is not capable of doing the booking. So I am speaking in support of that. I think it's very cost effective. 2 half-time positions, very cost effective. We have an endowment fund that we fundraise relentlessly for over the years. I think it's over $100,000, and the interest from that endowment fund was always earmarked to go to operations, to facility operations, and that means being able to use this facility for the purpose it was built, which was to have the performing arts. So I would encourage you to listen to what the presentation is coming up later this afternoon to understand that it's absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical that we have these positions in place so that we can book, so that the arts feels like their support of this building was worthwhile. And I think it's a good modest start for this thing. It's a safe start for this thing. It's going to bring in really positive buy-in from the arts community and hopefully from the rest of the community. And it'll make it a success. This is the final piece in the puzzle of this facility. A really important piece of the puzzle. And I think that if you have any understanding of how important this is, you will enthusiastically support it. And I appreciate all the work you've done so far in getting it to where we are.
Thank you, Mr.
Nice to see you in that chair, Allison. I have to say, thanks so much.
Next up in the room, we have Anne Frank Dippin.
My name is Anne-Frank de Ferrier-Chola, and I live on 1425 West Side Road. Your worship, ladies and gentlemen, councillors. Following my letter dated February the 4th, Sophie Inzinger, corporate officer, took the time to point out to me that during the council meeting of January the 13th, I had not noticed Mayor Leonard vote in favor of the proposed location of the parking lot along Grafton Lake. I am disappointed that the majority of the municipal council do not seem to understand the importance of environmental regulations regarding the protection of riparian zones. In the future, how is the municipality going to restrict and enforce any disturbance in any riparian area of Bowen Island? How will it respect the island's trust motto, preserve and protect, when itself does not protect its own riparian area? It is setting a precedent. Building a parking lot in that riparian area will destroy the present wetland that may be rejuvenated. Wetlands in riparian areas are of great importance to thousands of species that protect the water of the lake and the environment at large. Includes dragonflies, butterflies, frogs, etc. On the other hand, a parking lot will generate heavy polluted runoff into Grafton Lake and Terminal Creek. Why? to encourage people who are to walk 6 kilometers around Grafton Lake to come for that with their car. If needed, why not having visitors park a space at the rehabilitation center or at the community garden across the road? To conclude, I will encourage the municipal council to rethink the proposal of a solution of facility, i.e. the solution of the quick profit of a parking lot now to the long-term benefit of the wetland on the shore of Grafton Lake.
Last call for any speakers. We move on to our delegation, Simon Gravel, the Inspector, BC Conservation Officer Service. Read the food.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. Is it possible to know how much time I have?
We've got, what, 15 minutes?
10 minutes. Is
Yeah, and then
your
some time for questions from our council.
10 minutes? Okay. I believe you invited me to this council meeting to clarify the role and responsibility of COS. So I'm going to focus on this. Just as a warning, I'm not a wildlife biologist. I'm not here to explain the dynamic of the population dynamic and the health of the ecosystem on Bowen Island. But I can speak on behalf of COS for what's our role and what's our responsibility regarding dangerous wildlife, specifically on Bowen Island, about cougars. So as you know, for the past few months, we did receive multiple complaints regarding cougars on Bowen Island. So the role of COS is really to do an assessment of risk. And we're talking here about the risk for the cougar itself, but the risk for the public as well. And obviously public safety, or the risk to the public regarding to dangerous wildlife, is our priority. So we take those calls very seriously. And
Okay, we have no more sound. We have no more sound speaking.
Mr. Gravel, we've seen, lost the sound, so.
Oh, sorry about that. I might have just ordered it, the sound.
Yeah, that's all.
Water.
We've had a glass of water still. I don't know whether that's caused it.
Sorry, Simon, bear with.
can you hear me well though? Yeah, okay.
I think it's a Charles P.
Obviously.
It's just a thing that happens with laptops. Good. Do it.
You'd say something?
Can you hear me well?
Yes. Sorry about that.
I cannot hear you very well, but if you can hear me well, that's fine. Are we good to resume?
Yes,
I see some thumbs up.
yes,
Perfect.
thank you.
So I guess the important message for me is just to clarify here the role and responsibility of your local conservation officers based on the C2 Sky Zone. And so when we receive a complaint regarding dangerous wildlife, if it's a bear or cougar, coyote or wolf, we assess the risk to the public. So this risk is not necessarily based on the perception of the resident of the complainant, but really based on our knowledge of the animal behavior. So it's important to know that our officers are well trained and have extensive knowledge about those predator or those animals' behavior, even in urban setting or in wilderness area. So we have a long history of dealing with those situations, and our assessment is based on this knowledge. It's maybe important here to acknowledge that the cultural tolerance of cougars is very well known to be very low in every community, and that's not unique to Bowen Island. For some cultural reason, historic reason, the presence of a cougar always is alarming for people. And I understand that, and I can have empathy for that. However, it's important to note that cougar attacks on humans are extremely rare. And having the presence of a cougar on the landscape on itself is not necessarily a threat to your resident, to the public on itself. There's a reason why cougars are moving on our landscape. And we have the chance in British Columbia and the Lower Mainland on Bowen Island to be surrounded by wildlife. And understanding living with wildlife is challenging. And it is important for us to maintain a trust with the public and making sure that your resident on Bowen Island understand that we do care about the safety, and it is actually our priority. But our assessment of this threat of the presence of a cougar specifically on Bowen Island and the perception of fear and threat that the resident may have has to be acknowledged that it can do. There's maybe a gap there. So obviously, if I do have a cougar in my backyard, I will be alarmed. I can have some fear, could have some concern. But the assessment of a conservation officer needs to determine what's the presence of this cougar really represent in terms of risk and in terms of public safety threat. And that's the angle that our service needs to take for both reasons, for consistency reason, but also for conservation reason. We cannot respond to any alarming presence of wildlife by destroying this wildlife or capturing and moving and traumatizing and playing with the ecosystem that way. So we have a lot of accountability regarding to addressing public safety concern, but also taking the right action. So we take those actions very, very seriously. We assess the situation, and if there's a signs that leads us to believe and to know that this animal represents an immediate threat to public safety, you can be reassured and can be certain that we will respond and take immediate action to mitigate that risk. In the absence of such a level of threat to the public, that's what we categorize such animal in a category 1. Our guidelines are based on 3 categories, 1, 2, and 3. The category 1 would be the animal that required an immediate response to address what we believe to be a threat to public safety. But in all the cases and all the information we managed to gather so far on Bowen Island, none of the animal behavior was fitting into this category of wildlife. So the description was more fitting in a category 2 or 3. So a normal behavior that can definitely raise some concerns, I understand. But our response is not necessarily nothing there. I understand that there's a lot of things that can be done to avoid a situation like this to escalate. So for instance, we'll recommend the public to educate themselves. So what does it mean having a cougar on our landscape? What's the challenges and what everyone can do to mitigate risk or alleviate any fear, for example. So it is the responsibility of everyone to educate themselves wherever you live in BC about the challenges and what you can do to live with wildlife. And I'm not saying it's easy, and I understand that some people refuse to, but it is a reality. And again, it's not the role and responsibility of COS to control the movement and population of wildlife. It's not the first time you have a cougar on Bowen Island. You had bears before. In the past, we had reports of wolves that were not confirmed. But you can expect cougars, you can expect bears, you can expect predators on Bowen Island. And it's not something that the COS can shelter Bowen Island from something like this. It's just not our role and responsibility. In terms of community responsibility, there's a lot of things that a community like Bowen Island or the North Vancouver or multiple community in the Lower Mainland have taken as a community initiative is to implement an education program amongst your community. some people could be challenging for some people to reach out and access to the right information in a situation like this that is often approached with a lot of emotion. But there's a lot of community that implements some education program, and that's maybe a recommendation that I can make to Bowen Island. So to have easily accessible to your resident a lot of different information to reconfort people and provide information and making sure they understand what having a bear, a cougar, or any other animal, a deer on the landscape means, and what's each of us responsibility regarding this situation. I hope that provides some clarification. I'd like to repeat that we do take, the presence of a predator on Bowen Island seriously, and we'll keep assessing every complaint, every report we get. And if the situation change and we judge that there is indeed a threat to public safety, you can be reassured that we'll respond and mitigate that. But we're far from having reached this level. For instance, we don't have any recent report of this cougar. The most recent was before Christmas, I believe. We did have a report, but it was a cat believed to be missed and killed by the cougar, for later receiving the information that the domestic cat returned home safely a few days later. So since then, we didn't have any report. So it is possible that the cougar is still on Bowen Island. It is possible that the cougar swam away. We don't know. But I can, again, guarantee you that if the situation changed, if the threat level or the behavior of the cougar changed, then it is our responsibility to go on Bowen Island and take the proper action. This is not a threshold that we are even close or have any clue or reason to believe that we will reach anytime soon. I hope that provided you with some clarification. I would be happy to answer any of your questions, obviously.
Councillor Saunders has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Ravel, for giving us that information. Just a couple of things. I'm kind of wondering what your risk threshold is, and you did start to touch on that. And I guess when you talked about category 1, 2, and 3, and I think it might ease people's minds a little bit if you could tell us what the criteria are to determine what, like you said, well, on the experience of our officers, which I appreciate, but we don't know what the experience is. So if you could just give us briefly, and I don't mean in all detail, but just what are the criteria that you use when you're doing this risk assessment?
Yeah, for sure. One of the criteria is definitely the behavior itself and the repetition and location of the behavior. Having a cougar killing a deer in an interface type area, it's natural behavior. Having a cougar on a regular basis hunting on people's backyard, that would be escalating the situation. But that would trigger likely a lot of education, for example. But then if we have a lot of domestic animal being killed on a regular basis, that would escalate the level and the threshold of public safety risk and lead to a response. Another behavior could be a cougar entering occupied dwelling, for example. You can imagine if a cougar or a bear enter an occupied dwelling, so that it's defined on itself as a high level of habituation and comfort, and it's compromising situation for public safety. Another factor could be property damage. It's more often seen with bears. Bears sometimes learn a certain behavior and will cause extensive property damage. The example is breaking into vehicle to access non-natural food, and then can cause like thousands and thousands of dollars of damage over a period of time. That will also trigger a response from us. Obviously, if a cougar was to attack someone and injure someone, that would be reaching this level of this threshold as well. It's maybe, I don't have extensive amount of time here to talk about cougar behavior, but if I may say one thing to reassure people is the sighting of a cougar itself is almost an indication of very low threatening behavior. Cougars are not exposing themselves in their predatorial action, if I may say. So if a cougar is visible, is walking in people's backyard, is seen on people's surveillance camera, and so on, this is far from being an indication of a predatorial behavior against human. I would really invite to extend this answer to visit the Conservation Officer webpage, where those guidelines are available for the public. And also WildSafe BC has extensive amount of information regarding cougar safety and cougar behavior.
Would you ensure that those website links are sent to our corporate officer? Thanks.
Yes, of course.
And Councillor Fast has some questions?
No, just thank you very much for your session. I take the point about the ecosystem health. Thank you.
I just had one question, and I'm not sure. Are the cougars more nocturnal? Like come out at night versus coming out during the day?
Yeah, in the majority of the case, cougars use the night as an advantage for hunting, for sure, yes.
Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you very much for your presentation, and look forward to seeing those websites, and we'll post that information on our do a weekly news from municipality, so we'll post that information. And people will be able to go and watch your presentation afterwards because we video all our council meetings.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Bye now.
We're on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to pull from the consent agenda? Councilor Gary?
Can I pull 12:15, please?
Anybody else? A motion to approve the items as outlined in the February 2024 consent agenda. Moved. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Do you wish to speak to 12:15 when we get to that particular agenda item
Sure.
on the month?
Yep.
I think that.
So link it up to 8.3.
Okay. Turn the pages here. So we are at 6.1. Have Daniel Martin here.
Thank you. I'll just start my presentation here. Thank you. So I'm here today with a referral from the LCRB for a patio extension for the Bowen Island Pub. I did come before you with this in January, but this is now for consideration. So what is proposed is an extension to the outdoor patio for the Bowen Island Pub to an area that was approved under temporary COVID approvals, which have now expired, and the Bowen Island Pub is seeking a permanent approval for their patio extension. The patio doesn't increase the overall license capacity. The total capacity remains unchanged for the premise. The patio is in use on weekends, in the peak summer, during daytime hours. So I guess just to add to that, so when the patio is in use, then it reduces the number of patrons that can be inside the building. So our policy for referrals calls for a notice of the introduction to be provided, the introduction of the application to council, which took place in early January. A 30-day notice of consideration be provided, so mail, newspaper, sign on site, and then council will consider the referral. So we mail notice to properties within 300 meters of the property. We place notice in the undercurrent on site on the website. We received 8 letters of support for the proposed expansion. None indicated that they were within the mail out area. I didn't know any that seemed like they were within, so we didn't hear from any of the immediate neighbors on this proposal. And the recommendation is to provide this notice to the LCRB that whereas council's gathered input from the community within the immediate vicinity of the establishment, that council provide the comment that council support the proposed new outdoor patio, and that council direct staff to submit the council resolution and comment to the LCRB. So I'll open it up for, I'll just note, actually, I guess the report has some more detail on some of the questions that were raised when we introduced the application. I haven't gone into them in detail, but I'm happy to if council has specific questions. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Does anybody, Councillor Jurgensen, do you have a question for the planner?
I do. Through the chair, I was wondering if it's possible for Planner Martin to kind of detail where the original patio of the pub would have ended and what kind of extension this looks like. I did do a recent site visit, but was unable to figure out where the new portion would be versus the existing.
Thank you. So the original patio that was constructed, when the pub was built, is sort of a lower section of it. So it comes, if you enter the pub through its main entrance, you sort of loop around and you exit out on the side of the pub building into a lower patio area. So there's tables down there. There's sort of a wall next to you. You're sort of at this lower level and you're at grade with the pub itself. The patio extension then is actually physically higher up. So it's further south down Dorman Road, but it's actually higher up. So it sort of sits above the other patio. So you're no longer at grade with the existing pub, but you're at a completely different elevation. You're about, a story higher, and you would enter it directly off the sidewalk and not through the pub building itself, as a member of the public.
Okay. And that extension has been in use this entire time until their temporary COVID licensing expired?
I believe it expired last spring, which is why it wasn't in use last summer.
Okay, thank you.
Daddy?
Thank you, Director Martin, I'm not sure. I would trust their directors, but
Manager.
All right. Mr. Martin. I'm particularly interested in the and I asked you to include some history with respect to the proposed development when the pub was first the bylaws were amended to allow for it. So on your page 4 of 8, you've described that. And this, I guess what I'm concerned about is that the label that's been put on this liquor license thing is a permanent one for the patio, but that your report on the original agreements say that doesn't affect the phase 2 or later other developments of that land. So would the permanent status of this have any effect at all?
Through the chair, so the permanent would be the permanent approval from the LCRB. So their approval for the patio would no longer be temporary, but would be ongoing with the liquor license. But yeah, like development of that site would mean the surface parking lot and now this patio would be removed during construction. Yeah.
All right. So given the sewage treatment plant and escalating building costs and whatever else might be going on in the life of the Olmerton occupiers, then if and when they were ever able to build phase 2, then they would have to consider losing this pub area, this patio area. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for the planner? Somebody might make a motion? Thank you.
Where are we?
6.1.
So I would like to move that, whereas council has gathered public input for the community within the immediate vicinity of the establishment, now therefore council provides the following comments to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. The council support the proposed new outdoor patio. Council directs staff to submit the council resolution and comment report to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, LCRB, in response to the public notice of the Bowen Island Pub.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Thank you. Any more further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Moving along to 7.1, Snug Cove Design Guidelines.
Thank you. So this is another one that you have seen before, that we've come before you before, but this is the Snug Cove Design Guideline Project. And so this is a revamp of our design guidelines that affect the village revitalization development permit area in the heart of Snug Cove, which seeks to establish an arts and crafts style character of buildings within the area. So what you gave first reading to in December 9th, 2024 was Amendment Bylaw 674, which would replace Schedule E with the updated Snug Cove Design Guidelines. And then the bylaw itself would reformat our section 7.3 of the land use bylaw. So it would include requirements and exemptions section in that section of the bylaw, and then it would refer to the Schedule E, which is the updated Snug Cove Design Guidelines. So December 9th, you granted first reading to the bylaw, you referred to the Islands Trust. We heard back from the Islands Trust Executive Committee that the bylaw is not contrary to or at variance with the Islands Trust policy statement. And so staff are back here to seek second and third reading of Amendment Bylaw 674.
Just one point of clarification, Schedule E, which has been nicely formatted with color drawings, et cetera, is an attachment to the bylaw.
It will be an attachment to the land use bylaw, yes.
Anybody got any questions for the planner? Councilor Frost?
I don't have a question, so if Councillor Jurgensen has a question.
It's not a question, it's regarding the motion itself.
As a longtime member of the, as a few years being a member of the advisory design panel for this term and the previous term where this project has been worked upon, I think it's great that it's at this stage. This is a matter of completing work that was started, and it's much needed. I won't go into all the reasons, but suffice it to say, I'd like to move the motion.
Maybe, I think Councillor Jurgensen had a question about the motion.
Not so much a question, I was looking to amend the motion to simply second reading rather than second and third reading.
Is there any reason why we can't? We usually do second and third, but it was so simple. So is there concern that?
So if I understand correctly, we did first reading in December.
Right.
We do second and third, and then we have final adoption. Okay. That was my misunderstanding of. Withdraw.
Yeah, the meeting will come late.
Sometimes it's called fourth, sometimes it's called adoption, sometimes it's called final. It's confusing.
Okay, so
I'd like to make the motion that council refer draft policy, that council receive the results of the referral to the Islands Trust Executive Committee, and that bylaw number 674, 2024, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw number 57, 2002, and amendment bylaw number 674, 2024, be read a second and third time.
Seconder, Councillor Jurgensen. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. You're still here, Planner Morton. Process for disposal, 8.1. Process for disposal of municipal land for affordable housing.
Thank you. So this one we haven't seen before. And this one came out of our Housing Action Fund initiative. So as you know, we received agreement with the Government of Canada on our Housing Accelerator Fund grant, to provide up to $1.6 million to eliminate barriers to build housing. And that funding is based on the completion of the approved housing action plan. So these are the 6 initiatives in the plan. So we've fully completed number 1 and number 3. The other ones are underway, but this one is about number 6, which is about creating a process for disposal of city-owned assets for the development of affordable housing. And so what is before you is a draft policy that's to establish a process council can follow when making a decision to dispose of land. And I just wanted to stress in this, it's not about any one decision or locking council into a particular decision, but it's about just trying to establish this process and this procedure of council wants to say, we want to dispose of land. It's like this is a checklist to follow in making that decision. In the report, we brought some of the OCP policies that talk about using at the time of surplus lands or the community lands. So especially policy 169 talking about will address affordable housing issue when considering the preferred use and development of the surface land. So a similar idea in that it doesn't tie council into anything, but it's saying when you're doing this, you should be considering affordable housing. And that's kind of what this policy is trying to do is like when you're disposing of land, these are things that you want to consider. The draft policy itself outlines 7 steps in making a decision to dispose of municipal land. So they're about identification of the land, assessing the land, consulting on that decision, council reviewing it, appraising it, so you know the value of what you're looking to dispose of, consideration on how you're selling it. So making a conscious decision to say we're going to sell it, we're going to lease it, and then about documenting and reporting that decision. And I'm looking today for any initial input you have, and then really I'm looking to refer it to the Advisory Planning Commission for some more in-depth discussion before coming back to council again. So I'm happy to take input at this meeting or in lead up to that Advisory Planning Commission meeting, and then we'll be coming back to council.
Any questions for the planner on the report?
So you're talking several points here, and sorry, page 2 of 4 of your report. Identification of land for potential sale, and then number 6 in that list is method of sale. Are there any other options that you're considering in this in terms of something like a long-term lease that we're talking about with Birch, for instance, and Lot 3 and potentially the Lot 1 development and whatever makes economic sense? I think that one of the principles that we've been talking about that's come up is that we shouldn't be divesting ourselves from land assets, and that there's other ways of reaching a thing for development, but this is just talking about sales.
Yeah, I think I can make that more clear. So in the purpose, it talks about sale, lease, exchange, transfer, and the a lease of a land is disposal of the land. And so maybe it's strengthening when it talks about method of sale, maybe it's method of disposal and land may be disposed of, and making it clear that these are considerations of like the long-term, benefit of community ownership, ongoing ownership is something to be considered. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was my question too, was it seemed to be a little bit of a disconnect. And that would help make it clear to everybody, because I remember years ago, I thought disposal meant you were gonna get rid of it, which implies not for community use, but anything you can do in here, and I think you've done it, which is just call it for community use or emphasize that this is because it belongs to the community through our processes and our tax dollars and the arrangements and decisions made, that it should community land for community use kind of principle could be in here, and addressing number 6 would be good, because make that clearer right at the top. Thank you. But I think it's good to have this, and I'm glad that this is here, because it'll be a policy that will guide future councils who might not have been through all these situations, and it's important to think about the councils that will come. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Waite, do you have any comments?
Yes. Under number 6, the second bullet point, direct negotiation for strategic sales or partnerships such as to nonprofits or developers of affordable housing. I'm just wondering if it seems excessive that we have to get an appraisal and valuation done on the property if we're leasing it for affordable housing. I'm just wondering if direct negotiation and a strategic sale means that we could be exempt from having to do an appraisal.
Just going to add myself to the speakers list. I think part of the concern is the word disposal, using the word sale through it. I think it should be disposal throughout, but you would want an appraisal if you were going to actually sell it, dispose of it. But if you're just going to lease it, and so maybe there needs to be some qualification put under point 5.
Yeah, and through the chair, I think I just add, I think like I don't want to say value, but like the benefit is there of knowing the value of the land that is being leased to the affordable housing, even if just for their purposes, to know that like when they're seeking out, so it's like it's quantifying the municipal benefit that we're providing to the project, but whether that has to be a full like independent appraisal.
We use the appraised value for BC assessment as a proxy.
Yeah, like it doesn't have to be as detailed.
So if we can just build in some options and some flexibility.
I've been advised that Mayor Leonard has joined the meeting, and does he have any questions? We are on agenda item 8.1, disposal of municipal land.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor Morse. And yes, I am here. I'm sorry I couldn't join you in person today. I'm at an all-day training in the city, but I am following along. So thank you.
Anybody else got? At this point, it's a referral to the APC. So maybe if people have very specific comments, that they could forward those to planner to have for the discussion with the APC. I think the general discussion has been the use of the word disposal rather than sale through a document. And I guess the other question I had is whether one of the, and I didn't take time to go and dig it out. I do have a recollection from when we had the vote to acquire or to borrow or to acquire the property, that we indicated we were going to try and recoup some of the cost of borrowing or buying the land from sales of the land. So that might be something to just have a look at those things there. Councillor Fast.
Yeah, I personally, I don't think that necessarily should be in the process, because I think acquiring community land for community use has been a good thing, and to sell it off might not be in the best interests of the long term. Like, I think right now that land is a lot more valuable than it was back when it was purchased, and land doesn't seem to go down in value. So I wouldn't recommend putting that in myself. To recoup land, as I recall, that made it raised expectations in the community that the land would be sold so that funds would be available for other kinds of projects, which were not related to affordable housing. And so or not necessarily, anyway, I just don't think it should be in there. I think that's up to councils who are looking at acquiring land to think about how are they going to, what are they acquiring it for, and what they could be doing it with it. Thank you.
I would like staff, through the chair, I'd ask that staff review and research whether or not we're bound by a previous commitment with respect to the sale of the land in terms when it was originally purchased. So I agree with Councillor Fast that we don't want to include it in here because there's lots of other options from when we first got it. But I'd like to know whether or not we've got a previous commitment that we need to do.
there any further questions? So would somebody like to make the motion?
The council refer draft policy, quote, process for disposal of municipal land for affordable housing, end quote, to the advisory planning commission for recommendation.
Seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 We got 2 votes online.
Aye. Yeah, one from me.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. That was passed unanimously. I think we have Planner Bacon up next. For development variance permit at 9.
Sharing my screen. Sorry. Thank you, council. So this report is to provide details regarding a development variance permit application to vary the minimum required setback from the natural boundary of the sea for the replacement of an existing beach access staircase for the public that has become weathered and unsafe over time. In 2020, Metro Vancouver Regional District purchased the property at Dorman Point to expand Crippen Park. Since that time, Metrovan staff have been working on concept plans to connect Dorman Point to the rest of Crippen Park, which would feature a series of trails with viewpoints to provide vantage points of house sound, as well as a stair structure to provide beach access. A development variance permit application was previously submitted by Metrovan in 2022 to request a reduction of the setback from the sea from 30 meters to 2.0 meters for a beach access staircase, and also reducing that 30 meters down to 11 meters for the viewpoint number 1 structure. Council approved the request in September 2022. Neither structure was ever built, and after the 2-year validity of the permit expired in September 2024, the applicants must receive municipal approval again before proceeding with construction. Recently, Metrovan carried out work between 2023 to 2024 to complete trail access to Dorman Point, with the site open to the public as of September 2024. The only exception is the beach area, which is inaccessible due to the deteriorated condition of the existing public staircase. A new DVP application has then been submitted in 2025 to again request a setback reduction down to 2.0 meters for the beach access staircase. It's noted that a building permit application has already been received for that beach staircase construction. So that's encouraging, and appears they plan to complete it this time. In the most recent application, that viewpoint number 1 structure that was in the previous application was excluded this time. And the applicant explained that's because they're not prepared to move forward with the construction of the viewpoint at this time. So if or when Metrovan moves to complete that structure, a subsequent variance application will be submitted. As a even more recent update, would like to address this in the report, but just super recently in the last few days when visiting the site with the Metrovan staff, they informed me that it sounds like there are no intents to complete any structures in the near future, any of the structures other than what we've seen proposed. So basically, it sounds like shouldn't be holding our breath for any of these other structures, just what we're considering now. In reviewing the official community plan, a number of policies support the preservation of natural lands, the provision of public access to the seashore, and policies that encourage BIM to work with Metrovan on planning decisions related to Crippen Regional Park. As for the land use bylaw, park and trail use is permitted in any zone. There are also setback exemptions for stairways under 2 meters in height. However, this proposed staircase exceeds that height. In discussing alternatives to the variance, based on the steepness of the seaside cliff in this location, it's not possible to extend a public access staircase to that beach without a variance. While notices would normally be issued to properties within a 100-meter radius of the subject property, in this case, that radius would only capture just additional lands around just additional Metrovan parklands. So due to the most likely impacts being to the residents of Robinson Road, letters were therefore sent to just the owners of any properties along Robinson Road. Letters were received from 2 property owners, one of them being a Robinson Road resident and the other from outside the notification area. One writer expresses concerns about the impact of the stair construction on nearby foraged fish habitats, as well as concerns about the safety of the Dorman Point trails. The other writer expresses support for the rebuild of the public access stairs.
I think it'd be good to give a quick breakdown just of the past discussion in 2022 on this same application, since that might come up again. So some of the councillors had expressed concerns around how Metrovan would be dealing with large gatherings, weddings, those kinds of events, and it was clarified then that this Dorman Point is actually not under a park zoning, not under the same zoning as the rest of Crippen Regional Park, so it's not permitted for assembly use, just parks, just the trails. So not an issue at the moment. Nonetheless, other councillors and the two letter writers at the time, so again, these were the two people who wrote in 2022, expressed concerns around lack of washrooms, and they pointed out that with the trail system being, fairways from Snug Cove, accessible from Snug Cove, people walking up there, but not nearby enough to the point that people ended up going to the bathroom out there, and they reported, coming across human waste on these trails, and that was a problem. They were worried about that continuing. I did bring this up with the Metrovan staff in discussing this application, and they confirmed there are no intents to put any washroom facilities in the Dorman Point lands. Now that I have gone out there on a site visit with them, I can totally understand it's so steep out there. It would not be feasible definitely not to build any kind of a service washroom, even in terms of something requiring pump out. There's just very, very limited vehicle access out there. They have kind of a double trail as part walking trail, parts utility vehicle. And I think that utility vehicle wouldn't be much more than an ATV. But anyways, in talking with Metrovan staff, they mentioned that they do have their existing washroom facilities in the Snug Cove field, and which is sort of at the base of this trail, and that they're looking to replace those in the next year. So in looking at environmental implications, the Metrovan Regional Parks has adopted a Regional Parks Natural Resource Management Framework, and they use that as a general guide to their approach on parks planning. More specifically for this site, Metrovan had reports prepared by a registered biologist in 2021 that assessed the environmental qualities and sensitivities of the Dorman Point lands and provide some general recommendations around cliff preservation. So take a quick virtual site visit here. This is just the trail leading right down to where those stairs are. And I should have backed up a bit because I'm actually taking this picture over a fence. So there's a wooden fence there, and you wouldn't, naturally walking around and respecting the fences, you wouldn't end up walking to this this staircase. And also note there's a tree that you can see is falling across the trail. I'll have to remove that before it goes in. The stairs itself, that's what they are. Of course, they'll look a little bit different, the replacement ones, but yeah, same exact elevation. And this is the kind of location it brings you down to, is the beach with a great view of these pretty sheer cliffs there. So it's a pretty awesome location. And ultimately, staff recommend the council directs staff to issue notices and prepare for a consideration hearing at the council meeting of March 24th, 2025.
Any questions for the planner? Councillor Fast and then Councillor Jurgens.
Thank you for the report. I remember this. I'm wondering about the recommendation to direct staff to send notices to everybody within 100 meters. Would you propose that different figure is what I'm understanding?
Sure, sort of, yeah. I guess just unless council thinks otherwise, do the same as we did for this one, to all properties along Robinson Road.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Planner Backen, would you be able to clarify for public which of the letter writers was in support and which was concerned? You mentioned there was one that was on Robinson Road and one from outside the area. I was just wondering if that was possible to clarify.
Sure, it's Councillor Jurgensen. It's the letter writer from Robinson Road was expressing concerns. The one outside of their notification radius was expressing support.
Thank you.
You mentioned that Metro had a registered biologist report from 21, and that was with respect to the land. The letter of concern was with respect to the beach and the foraging fish population. So is there an update with respect to the registered biologist report with respect to the fish?
So Councillor Getty, they do, the biologist report touches on the forest fish habitat. It kind of identifies where those are located. It does not, in the same way as the kind of biologist reports we would require with a development permit or something, it doesn't address the exact, the stairs and how they're constructed and give recommendations on, say, silt fencing or something like that. So So I guess I'd say it's an assessment of sensitivities in the area, identifying where they are, to keep away from them, that kind of thing, but not something that's providing direct construction recommendations on this staircase right next to them.
All right, is that something that would be to our advantage to either organize through the environmental committee or our staff, or to require of Metro?
If the council feels it's a concern, they can absolutely add it, and we would require it. In terms of like, we do have development permit designations over any identified environmentally sensitive area. This one doesn't have one. They have, with the biologist report they've prepared, they already have, I feel they've already gone above and beyond from at least what they're required. And
Welcome to Bowen Island.
yeah.
Okay, but we're talking not just about the construction of stairs, we're also talking about access to the area for any number of visitors. Right, whoever can get down there. So has that been part of the assessment?
Sorry, are you asking in regard to some of the concerns in the letter? Are you asking if kind of the safety of the trails has been?
No, not the safety, no, I'm talking about the habitat.
Okay.
Impact on the habitat, both the construction and the access by visitors.
Okay, so it's existing trails leading to this stairway, and that trail system is what's addressed through the existing biologist report. So I don't think there's any crossover through any new habitats that have been identified. Yeah.
Is that in the report somewhere, the biologist report?
No, I don't have those attached to this version.
Thank you. I've been involved in many of the beach accesses and as they've been developed on Bowen and staircases running down to beaches. And it's my understanding that the main risk to forage fish eggs and spawning habitat is pollution, especially oil and ships and garbage breaking up along the shoreline. I'm not aware of any concerns myself about people walking down there on the beach, and right at the water's edge would be where fish are spawning. I'm also aware that we've been doing, and Carla's not here today, but I think we've been doing, Carla's our environment park staff, and I thought I saw that she had signed off on this report. So anyway, I just, I'm not aware of people walking on the beach as ever being a risk factor for forage fish. Neither has this spot been identified as a place where forage fish have been observed to be using the habitat or as a special significance. So, I think we've got lots of these on Bowen Island, and people using the beach usually aren't even walking right through the waves at the water's edge, although that's where a few unofficial observations of forage fish roiling in the bubbles right at the water's edge have come from beach users. And I don't see a risk, so I'm prepared to move the motion when people are ready.
I was just wondering before that if we could ask staff to refer the letter. I think it's the letter from Rob Knight that Councillor Getty's referring to. Refer that letter to Metro Vancouver. So there was an answer when we get to make the decision. And are you wanting to amend the motion to delete the with 100 meters and insert or leave with
Properties along Robinson
or
Road.
leave within 100 meters and all properties on Robinson Road?
Sure.
Leave the standard wording. Okay. Want to make a motion?
Well, I'm just going to make the one that's on the page, and that notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DBP 2025-0007 for the variance of minimum setback from the natural boundary of the sea for Dorman Point 930 WF at the March 4th, 2025 meeting. 24th, March 24th, 2025 meeting council. Thank you. That council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of development variance permit PVP 2025-0007 in accordance with section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties along Robinson Road, and within 100 meters of the legal boundary of Dorman Point 930 WF.
Seconder? Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Ah,
Okay, that was carried unanimous. Thank you. We now have Patrick Garriam, our Director of Engineering, and agenda item 8.3.
Council. So I'm bringing a report today to provide an update on the multi-use path and to get some agreement from council on next steps. So I was just going to pull up a short presentation. I put the maps that were included on the council report and presentation slides. In case that helps the discussion. So essentially, we've constructed about 1.3 kilometers of the Cross Island Multi.
Coming up, there's nothing up on this screen.
See that there?
Yep. Can you fix it so it's just this line? There we go.
Okay. You can see we've started, well, we didn't do this necessarily in sequence from east to west, but so far we've constructed the east end of the path, which is about 23% of the total length across the island to Bowen Bay Road. And we're currently building the next section, which is continuing from just where it ends currently, just past Artisan Lane, up about 300 meters further down Grafton Road. It's a primarily off-road path that I can zoom in on that section there.
So the green section?
The dotted green section there is the part that's under construction right now. About midway through that section, there's a steep ravine that's adjacent to Grafton Road. The original design that was tendered, and the tender was awarded to North Construction in November of 2024. The original design included a retaining structure to retain that portion of the path. The geotechnical engineer that was hired by North Construction was unable to come up with a suitable retaining wall design and recommended a fill slope, a rock fill slope. Another benefit of the rock fill slope is that it provides support for Grafton Road, which is there is a failure risk to the road at this location due to the unstable nature of that ravine. So that is marginally more costly than the tender price for the wall, but nothing beyond what could be accommodated within the contingency of the project. So what that they're proceeding with that work now. They should be finished construction in April of that phase. From the end of that phase where it joins up to Grafton Road, the next phase around the bend at Charlie's Lane, the section that's shown in orange there is probably even more challenging in that there's even steeper and deeper ravines immediately adjacent to Grafton Road, north side of the road. And that requires, really, it's not feasible to construct an off-road path or to widen the road on the north side. And it would require a realignment of the road, shifting it further south to create enough space for a multi-use path on the north side. That would also, we have the same concerns about Grafton Road stability at those ravine locations, and moving the traffic load further away from that would be, beneficial in terms of the risk of road failure. So we have, I'll get to the, due to the cost of that section, we've proposed that as a phase 2 future phase. We do have some funding that was secured through the BC Active Transportation Grant Program that has to be used by March 31st, 2026. So, ideally would be something that we include in the 2025 budget to build the next phase. What we're proposing is, if you look at all of the sections between the end of the current phase that's being built now and Forster Road, which is adjacent to Grafton Lake, probably the least challenging portion is the section between Connolly Road and Forster Road, and proposing to proceed with that portion of the work. We're still working on getting some more detailed cost estimates for that, and if the cost estimates are exceeding what we have available in grant money. So essentially, we have $500,000 improved grant funding from BCAT. We've applied for funding from TransLink for their 2025 grant program. And we expect that we will be successful in receiving that, which would be somewhere around $207,000 based on last year's amount. And then the municipal contribution would have to be 25%. So that would be a $236,000 municipal contribution in the next phase, which would have a total value of $943,000. So that is the first recommendation in the report is that council approve $236,000 municipal contribution to the next phase of the multi-use path, which we're proposing from Connolly Road to Forster Lane. And that would be funded in part from the Community Works Fund, $158,000, and in part from Incomplete Works Reserve Fund. The other, and now getting back to the challenging piece that requires realignment of Grafton Road. There is a grant opportunity that is available now. It requires application by February 26th, so in the next couple of days. It doesn't have it has an upper limit of like $50 million, so it can fund larger projects. What we're proposing is that we apply for that grant funding for that next piece that requires realignment of the road. We have some preliminary cost estimates for that phase. The realignment of the road and construction of the path would be in the order of $1.75 million. We're proposing to include an additional $250,000 to construct retaining structures, essentially to avoid having to acquire private land. So, and east side of the road. And so that would require, well, it's a 60% grant funding, so that would require the $2 million and municipal contribution of 800,000. It does permit stacking of funds, and we do expect that these BCAT grants will continue to be annual. So there will be likely the opportunity to apply for another BCAT grant in the fall of 2025 for $500,000.
Sorry,
that
what's
would-
BCAT?
BC Act Transportation Fund.
Thank you.
So that's the grant that's
yeah.
funding the current section. We have another one of those for the next piece we're recommending from Forster to Connolly.
Yes.
And then we would propose to apply for another one. And that would reduce the municipal contribution for that section to 300,000. And it's possible that we find other grant funding, from TransLink or other sources that we can further reduce that amount. That grant doesn't have to be spent until March 2030, I believe. So there is time to secure additional grant money. And then that would leave the third piece in order to complete the multi-use path between Cardina Drive and Grafton Lake, which would be a tremendous asset for the community. That third piece, which would connect phase 1 and phase 2. And there are a couple of challenging sections on that piece. There's the crossing of Terminal Creek, which is a large culvert that's still in relatively good condition. Some minor realignment of the road would be required to make that work and to ensure that the path can be fit in without having to replace that culvert. There is a failed culvert at the corner of Grafton Road and Cates Hill Road that does have to be replaced. And that would be done as part of this project. And if, it is eroding towards the road due to the failed culvert. And if it does have to be replaced before we're able to proceed with that phase, then it would be designed and built to accommodate the future multi-use path. So those are the next phase that's currently under construction, and the next phases of the multi-use path that would lead us up to Grafton Lake. And then when we get beyond Grafton Lake, the section that's shown in purple there is intended to be built by the Lakelands developers. The timing for that would be dependent on the construction of their next phase of that project on the south side of Grafton Road. And that is, at this point, is uncertain. They don't intend to proceed with that phase of work until they have, security on a water source for the project. And then that would take the multi-use path from Forster Lane up to Harding Road. And then from Harding Road, the rest of the way up to Bowen Bay Road, we haven't really got any survey or design for that portion. We do have just a very general, high-level feasibility study that I believe was done in 2019 by Urban Systems. And there's really been no work beyond that on those future phases. One of the optional recommendations in this report was to include some municipal funding, suggesting $100,000 to fund some additional design work, and that would enable us to advance other phases of the project and to be in position to apply for grant money for other parts of the path. We don't have currently grant funding for planning and design work, but those opportunities do come up. And given the other financial commitments that are being asked for here, the suggestion is that we defer that design work until we can apply for additional grant money. Find planning and design one. So those are the, that's an overview of the report and, of the recommendations. Screen there. If there's any, comments, questions?
Thank you for the chair. Just clarification for me, if you would. In one of the sections you indicate, sorry, in the second, no, it's okay, go to the next one, So the proposed $2 million extension. So for this, applying for a grant for 60%. So the other $800,000, the municipal piece of that, do we have to commit to that in order to get the grant, or do you get the grant and then say, good, now we can do the rest of that?
There's no actual requirements in the submission of this grant, this HIC, Housing Infrastructure and Communities Canada, HICC grant, that we put in council resolution. But as a general practice, we get council approval to apply for a grant. It is implied when you're applying for a grant that has a 60% contribution that you're gonna come up with the other 40%.
No, of course, I understand it's implied. I just want to make sure that we're not like, oh, you didn't get the grant, you still have to spend the 800. In fact, now you have to spend 2 million.
No, I mean, the risk there would be if we couldn't come up with the 800 through other grants or other means, then we would have to forego that funding, which is never, it's never good in that, you apply for money, you awarded it, and then you walk away from it. It's not great for our reputation when it comes to applying for future events.
Thank you.
I think Mayor Leonard has a comment, question.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Morris, and through you, I'm just looking at the numbers here. In the first part of this recommendation, 236,000 municipal contribution to be funded from Community Works funds and the Incomplete Works Reserve Fund. I'm curious how much, first through you, Chair, to the staff, how much of that Community Works Fund do we have available, and what does this represent in terms of a spend?
To Mayor Leonard, Community Works Fund available, providing that project took place after December, providing it was completed after December 31st, 2025, so that we would be able to access the 2026 allocation of Community Works funding. Then we would have approximately 158,000 available from that fund to use to pay for that portion of the project. 78,000 from Incomplete Works Reserve is it's a bit of leftover funding that was set aside for a capital project that was unspent several years ago. So that it's really an allocation of our accumulated surplus, but it was set aside for a capital project and was never spent. So it's kind of just been sitting there.
Okay.
Your second question, sorry, I didn't quite understand what you were asking.
I think you've answered it. The other piece was I was curious about the Incomplete Works Reserve Fund. I hadn't heard of that. And then just in terms of the Community Works funds, that type of fund, from my understanding, can be applied to a broad range of infrastructure programs. So it's not as specific as some of the pieces like climate action funding or the funding that we get from TransLink. I'm just curious, maybe to hear from staff, just in terms of prioritization, if there was $158,000 available from Community Works funds, would staff consider the multi-use path the highest and best use of those funds, or would there be more pressing projects that we would possibly put that money in service for?
I would say overall, there probably are more pressing projects. If you look at, for example, prioritizing capital replacement of infrastructure that's failing over building new infrastructure. I guess one of the key factors here is that it's leveraging you know, the larger portion of the overall funds, the 75% grant funding, and that without it, we aren't able to leverage that fund. So yes, considering that as well, that's why we're recommending that it be put towards this use. Not necessarily because it's, you know, just on the face value of the projects and their relative level of priority, maybe it's not the highest, but given that we can leverage these funds, I think it is a good use of our community works reserve.
Okay. And through you, Chair, thank you to the director. And I suppose what I'm weighing in my mind here is that, you know, firstly, the community works funds can be used towards other projects. It's not tied to specific like active transportation projects like we see some of the other funding. And we know that in our existing capital program, you know, from asset management to large infrastructure projects that we have on the go, that there are funding gaps that either exist or will emerge. So, you know, I feel like I'm cooling a little bit on this project, and I'm curious to hear from the other councillors what the sentiment is around the table. So thank you.
Councillor Getty? So looking at your report, under page 2 of 7, future phase 1, that on your map was the bright pink section, I believe, from Hunley Road to the lake.
Yes.
Okay, so this is and that's the section that we're talking about now in terms of allocating the 236,000.
Not on page 2.
Sorry, your page 2 of 7 is the written description of future phase 1.
Oh, future phase 1, yeah. That's right.
So I've been looking at these numbers and I have trouble with it. So the 500,000 at 70% funding, that would mean the 30% funding would be municipal or possibly some other grant, but we're talking about municipal at this point, right? Okay, so if 500,000 is 70%, my calculation of the remaining 30% then is 215,000. And similarly with the 207,000 at 75% funding, the 25% that's missing would be 69,000, which adds up to 991,000 for a completed project instead of the 943 that's in this paragraph. And the two allocations for the 30% and the 25% add up to 284, which is different from the 236.
It's because there's you can stack grant funding, and then you have to look at within each of those grants, what are the requirements and rules that govern the stacking. And so for the BCAT grant, we can use TransLink funding to fund part of our portion. In the agreement for the TransLink funding, there's a requirement that if there's stacking of projects that the municipality contribute a minimum of 25%. So that then becomes the governing.
Okay, so the TransLink is the one that Bill has also applied for additional funding from TransLink, expected to be approximately 207 at 75%, but the funding has not yet been approved. So at this point, that is up in the air in terms of whether or not we can get any of that 75% or stacking or otherwise, right?
We don't know for sure. No,
Yeah.
it is.
TransLink is the one that we've been talking about in all the other meetings about their budget and their concerns and whether or not this funding is going to continue.
No, it's definitely continuing for 2025. There is a
Yes.
question about future years,
Yes.
and it is, it's an allocated grant program, so it's not as opposed to a competitive grant program. So essentially they have allocations for the various communities around the region, based on the size of the community, and the projects just have to be compliant with the guidelines for those grants.
I guess my overall question is that we've just gone through a fairly detailed budget process and we've been talking about all the different wish lists and requirements and needs of all the different departments. And this feels very new, like we haven't actually looked at this in any detail. Is this something that I've missed, or is this something that's just coming up at this meeting or this agenda?
It has been put forward in the 2025 5-year financial plan. It wasn't included in, at this point, it hasn't been included in the 2025 budget. And I think the reason for that was that we felt, and the CFO felt, that council needed to explicitly make the decision about including it, given the need to contribute our own funds from these sources.
So this is in addition to what we've talked about for the 25 budget.
If I may, I think the other reason too is because the knowledge of the geotechnical conditions have also changed. Is that correct? Between when we presented the budget and now, like about the rock infill that was required is a new piece of that has come forward in the interim.
That doesn't affect any of this.
Fast.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in support of these motions, having been part of the work from the Transportation Committee through the transportation plan that was adopted that identified the multi-use path as a top priority of the community through community engagement, as a solving kind of issue that helps with climate action. It helps with affordability for families that are looking for options to get their kids to school that don't include another car to drive, that include active living for health, and that include all kinds of other benefits from having a multi-use pathway, including the bigger picture of becoming less vehicle reliant or less of a car-centric culture and more of a walk-on island invitation to the other people that come to join us and who we might prefer use the multi-use pathway than drive onto the ferry and onto the roads. So all kinds of factors in play in my interest in moving this all forward. This is the first time I've seen the proposal to put a gap in it. Usually we've been building up from the ferry into the middle of the island, but I understand the justification here, and it seems clear to me that it's a good return on investment to when you get like 70% of the funding comes from off-island sources or TransLink sources, which Bowen Islanders pay into through their taxes. So that's good return on investment. It seems to me that to ensure that the available grant funding can be used so that we don't have to give it back is why the Connolly Road to Forster Road portion is proposed to be done next. Is that correct?
Yes, we wouldn't have enough secured grant funding to do the next piece that requires the realignment of the road.
Right.
And we do have to do a project between now and March of next year.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. And with the as far as I can understand, having been part of this, we have been very successful in getting these grants. So it seems to me that as somebody with a modest lifestyle and not a financial person, however, this seems to me to be good use of taxpayers' dollars to leverage it to get like 60 to 70 to higher amounts of money from granting organizations that benefit life on Bowen Island and safety on the road and all those things. So anyway, I'm in support, and I'd be prepared to move these motions
Have a couple
when people are ready. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just having a little bit of trouble with the numbers. So future phase one, are there two BCAT grants? Is that? You mentioned another BCAT grant, 500 at 70 has been approved.
Yeah.
Yet you've also got a BCAT grant under future phase two funding.
Yes, so there's one that's funding the current phase, it's under construction. There's one that's been approved that has to be used by March of next year. That's looking at future phase one.
But you've got a BCAT grant under future phase two.
That would be one that we'd intend to apply for in the fall.
Okay, so this basically has not, so the motions don't have anything to do with, because there's a motion here to approve funding of up to 60% of the proposed $2 million, which is future phase two. So are we going to apply for the BCAT funding as well?
Yes, when it comes up, which we expect to be in the fall.
Oh, okay. So the $300,000 municipal contribution wouldn't be in the 2025 budget. That would be in the 2026 budget.
Yeah.
Okay. And the future phase three, the blue dotted lines, you're not proposing to even start work on those?
We haven't got an identified funding source for that piece yet.
Okay. So it's the yellow, orange, as you call it, and the Connolly Road, the pinkish purplish piece. So, because I was having trouble trying to tie the 207. It doesn't show up anywhere on these other pages. And
It's under future phase one funding.
okay, but you've got options for funding future phase one. So there's no sort of detail as to how much future phase one is going to cost in total in a chart.
Under the financial consideration section, page 4, each phase has a chart showing the details of the funding source.
Which one is? On page 4, I've just got potential funding option 1 and potential funding option 2.
They both fund future phase one. We're still awaiting confirmation of the transfer funding.
That's not there.
Well, yeah. Option 1 is assuming
That's these two little charts. Future phase 1, all right. I think I've got I'm still not comfortable with spending the money on. How easy would it be, or can it be, the money that we've got for the yellow section be transferred to the pink fuchsia section?
We haven't got money for the yellow section.
Thought we had a BCAT grant.
Right, we have a BCAT grant for pink section.
So the yellow section is future phase 2.
So when we're looking at applying for the HICC grant for.
Okay. And the BCAT funding, we still haven't applied for.
Right.
So I guess my question was then to the resolution, why not apply for the HIC funding and the BCAT funding so we can do the pink phase for all of it?
Proposing to do pink phase using funds that we've already got approved. And hopefully will get approved with TransLink.
The pink phase is future phase 1. And how much we already got approved for future phase 1? Just the.
100,000.
So we've got a BCAT. So the future phase 1 is going to cost 700 and some.
About that, I think we would, we still need to complete some detailed cost estimates for that piece. We would match the grant funding and municipal contributions that we have available to what's actually affordable. And whatever, we're not able to build, if any of that piece would become part of
And then on
phase 3.
future phase 3, a curiosity question. We dug up and replaced the road around that corner, I thought, sort of where they found bed springs, et cetera, and all sorts of lovely things. Just, culvert wasn't replaced at that time?
You're talking about the Cades Hill Road corner?
Yeah.
Yeah, the culvert is in bad shape. It definitely wasn't replaced.
And then there's another culvert further along on Grafton Road?
Yeah, there's a large, it's about a 2.1 meter diameter culvert at Terminal Creek. So just east.
So that's where
of-
Terminal Creek goes under the road.
Yeah,
So not too far from Connolly.
just east of Connolly.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. Anybody, John?
Thank you. To the chair, that, the 158,000 that Mayor Leonard mentioned, that community works fund. Are there any other recommendations or projects ongoing or anything else that have suggested use of that money, or is that just sitting in a pile waiting for somebody to say this is a good idea?
It's targeted funds for infrastructure replacement. So it's gas tax money, so it's driven towards infrastructure, typically roads-based projects.
Right. Okay, so this is something it could be used for. There are a lot of other things it could be used for as well.
Last year, we used it to replace the bridge.
Right, okay, thank you. Okay, well, I don't discount in any way anything that Councillor Trask said about the value, the different ways this can contribute to life on the island. I think I'm already on record as thinking that we need to deal with the hard infrastructure things, things like roads and getting water and wastewater dealt with in a manner that we can, which contributes to other things like being able to add the homes that we're talking about in other conversations. So in my mind, it's tough to be spending money on this path right now. I recognize that there's a grant there and you don't want to turn back money, but it's still money coming out of our pockets at the end of the day, even though somebody else is saying, well, we'll give you something too. That's great. But I'm just not comfortable with us spending money on things that I think we've got better ways to spend it, frankly, that are more critical to life on the island. In fact, they're water, wastewater, roads, those aren't amenities. Those are things we really need day to day. Thank you.
One more question. What happens if we don't get the TransLink grant?
Then it would be looking at the table in option 2 on page 4. We would only have 719,000 available, and our contribution would be 219.
So we just build less.
Yes.
Mayor Leonard, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, I'd just like to move the motions to get them on the table. And then we can have a discussion and a debate around the actual motions. So I'll move that council approve a $236,000 municipal contribution to the next phase of the multi-use path construction from Connolly Road to Forester Lane to be funded as part of the 2025 capital budget, 158,000 from CWF and 78,000 from Incomplete Works Reserve Fund.
Do we divide
Second,
them
that
up?
council- yeah, so I'm going to move them and then I'm going to request that they be severed. Or we can just go through them one at a time. It's your preference, Chair.
Unless somebody's got wording amendments for them all, why don't you just move the whole thing and then sever?
Second, that council approve and support the application for grant funding through Housing Infrastructure and Communities Canada Active Transportation Fund Capital Project Stream to fund up to 60% of a proposed $2 million extension of the to the multi-use path. And that council defer spending $100,000 to design future phases of the MUP until relevant grant opportunities to fund the design work can be identified.
Seconded by Councillor Fast.
Okay.
Are you
and
gonna
then,
move to sever?
yeah, so move to sever.
So we deal with the first recommendation.
You want to speak about?
You don't, I don't think we need a motion to sever, it's just, it happened,
Yeah.
they're severed. So, first recommendation, did you wish to speak to the first recommendation, Mayor Leonard?
Yes, I did. So I'm happy to see these on the table, and I am generally supportive of the idea of the multi-use path. Where I feel uncomfortable in this moment with this motion is that we're in a budget process right now, and you know, I would be happy to see this come up as part of the budget, but I believe that we need to see it in context. So even in this agenda, we have a number of other items that are coming forward that will possibly have budget implications, you know, such as down in 10.3. So I would, if this is going to be included, you know, my preference to the budget process. Once we get the back from that process, we have the utilities meeting coming up, and then on March 24th, council is receiving that budget. So I feel uncomfortable in approving this expenditure right now at this time, when I think it needs to be seen in context with the budget. You know, that would be my.
So to staff, is there any reason that this resolution has to be passed today? The first paragraph, I can think the second one is time sensitive.
We could, I guess we were just looking for direction to include it in the proposed draft of the 2025 budget. We could just include it and have that discussion as part of the budget process. So I suppose it's not essential that it be approved today.
Do you wish to make a motion to refer to the budget, to defer to the budget process, Mayor Leonard?
Yes, I'll move that it be referred to the budget process for council's review on the March 24th regular meeting of council.
Deferred and referred.
Second.
Anybody want to comment on that? All those in favor of the motion to defer and refer to the. Opposed? Councilor Kraus?
And so was Councillor, I'm curious, Councillor Wade, how did you vote?
I was just about to ask that. You were in favor?
Yeah. I was in favor.
So Councillor Fast opposed. So the next motion, the council approve and support the application for grant funding through Housing Infrastructure and Communities Canada. I understand this one is time sensitive. The grant's got to go in on Wednesday.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so. And is there some flexibility? What we use it for? Because you've just talked about a proposed extension. In the grant application, do you actually have to find? Yeah.
Yeah, we actually have to present drawings and process drawing what we're intending to build.
And the intention is to build which section?
From the end of what's currently being built now, around the bend.
So the yellow section.
The yellow section.
So perhaps it would be best to amend the motion to read the yellow section as presented on February 24th. $2 million extension. There's a big difference on how I'm going to vote. So on the understanding, or we can leave it that on the understanding that the proposed extension is the yellow section. So, favor of the motion as presented? And that's, and opposed?
They were both for.
They were both for. Okay, so just me in opposition. My opposition is not to applying for the grant, but the specificity of it. And the last resolution is that council defer spending 100,000 to design future phases of the MUP until relevant grant opportunities to fund the design work can be identified. Any more discussion on that one? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. I think we logged that one to death.
Can we have a 3-minute break?
Oh, okay, I was thinking to do that between the open and the closed, but, oh, 3 minutes. Anybody? Which section was it?
8.3, what we just did. Oh, so it should be back into. Consent. We pulled one letter. 12.53.
Want to move that, receive for information? You want me to say their vote?
Yeah,
I can't see them.
That would be helpful, actually.
Yeah.
Be like, for wake of the affirmative.
Yeah.
The whole, roll call.
Oh, no. New sources of municipal. Oh. How are we doing time wise? Last 100. Did you lose that? Oh, it's gonna come in for the month. Oh, maybe it was done. So maybe that's what it's gonna come in. I texted in this morning when I was talking. Need to. City joined them out at the time of the month. Okay. Now we've lost everybody. You said 3 minutes. That's scary.
Over the left. And go.
If anybody's cold back there, it's because the furnace is not working in this part of the building anymore. There's enough hot air to keep us warm.
Ooh.
I did get it, but that one crashed earlier. Yeah, but I just can't find it now. All right, y'all here? Councillor Getty, you were going to make a motion.
Yes, please. I had earlier asked that 12:15 be pulled from the consent agenda. And that was related to the item that we just discussed, so I'll move now that it be accepted for information instead.
Second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It appears that we have lost Mayor Leonard. He may not back, I'm not sure. Okay, we are at 10.1, recommendations of the Community Economic Development Committee, read the municipal regional district tax. So we have put the MRDT is, we don't get delegations at this point or presentations.
For a presentation.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we had these members of the committee. Get a presentation.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Sorry. So I'll let, you can make your presentation. Just know that the MRDT is on our strategic plan.
Yes.
And we may want to defer discussion to a future meeting with, joint meeting with Committee of the Whole with Council and the Economic Development Committee and the Tourism Bowen Island Committee.
Perfect. I'll be very brief then. My name is Brian Haley. I'm a member of the Community Economic Development, as well as the subcommittee that was tasked with looking at additional revenue sources. I don't intend to read the motion, as the chair has indicated. Some of these things have already been superseded by the fact that council on December the 9th actually did consider the November 2024 report of Planning Committee with respect to the MRDT and did direct council staff to commence the application process. Now, staff had originally recommended the 3% tax as well as the 50-50 percent split between tourism and affordable housing. However, I gather that at your meeting on December the 9th, you've referred or at least deferred the decision with respect to 3% and the split to a later strategic planning session. I guess what we're trying to emphasize with respect to the recommendation from Economic Development Committee is that there is a rather dire funding issue with respect to tourism Bowen Island. I think we all readily agree that tourism is extremely important to the island economy. Our official community plan has very clear principles in terms of objectives that recognize the integral part of tourism to the island economy and with a focus on sustainable tourism. And it's the view of Economic Development Committee that unfortunately tourism won't manage itself. And it's very important to ensure that there is adequate staffing either through the municipality or through Tourism Bowen Island to ensure that tourism is managed and directed. Certainly the recommencement of the MRDT is a very important step, but in reviewing the staff report on that matter, even if everything goes super well with that process, there won't be any money flowing from the tax until January of 2027. So that's almost 2 years from now. And we think that it is important that the funding requirements for tourism Bowen Island be considered in the interim as part of the 2025 budget process. And certainly council has the ability to refer this matter to the budget process. We note that In the draft budget, I believe tourism Bowen Island was down at $25,000 as part of the budget. My understanding is that they had requested $44,000 for 2025 and slightly higher amount in 2026. Certainly, those were figures that were put forward in order to cover wages, other increasing costs, as well as to recognize the fact that the funding, the grants that had been more readily available during the pandemic are now drying up. So that there certainly is a dire need on the part of tourism on Bowen Island to be properly funded from a management perspective. The remainder of our recommendations deal with recommendations 2, 3, and 5. And these are essentially the committee, the Community Economic Development Committee, looking to council for a little direction as to how the committee should be focusing some of our energies. We have had some preliminary work done with respect to public-private partnerships, as you can see in this report. We've also started looking at perhaps revenue being generated from other municipal resources in terms of looking at additional grant funding. As I said, public-private partnerships might also be beneficial to look at in the future, particularly with respect to passenger ferry service. So essentially, we need to know from council whether or not we're using our time productively in terms of pursuing these avenues. And certainly, if you can give us that direction, we would appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your report. I think because of the depth and breadth of everything that's in there and other documents that might need to be looked at, this is something where we need to have a committee of the whole with Community Economic Development Committee and Tourism Bowen Island, and relevant financial statements and everything else present. And so I would like, so thank you very much for bringing it up, and I think you've raised quite a number of good points. So I would like to suggest that we change the motion to read that, or I would move that council receive the recommendations and background provided in the document titled New Sources of Municipal Revenue to Support Sustainable Tourism on Bowen Island, dated November 27th, 2024, as presented and amended at the Community Economic Development Committee meeting held January 22, 25, and refer it to a future committee of the whole meeting with the CEDC and TBI.
It's second now.
What is TBI?
Tourism Bowen Island.
Thank you.
I was getting thirsty. Councillor Getty?
Can we, the second recommendation with respect to instructing staff in consultation with Tourism Bowen and the Resilient Community Housing to recommence the process to implement a municipal and regional district tax of 3%. There was some discussion at our earlier meeting in terms of the timeline on that and how long it was going to take. And then Mr. Daly has just indicated that any revenue stream that were to come would be January 27th. So that's, I worry that we're delaying things in terms of when this can come into a committee of the whole and get all of those groups together, and whether this is something that could be started at the same time in terms of getting that information organized, what steps we have to take so that we're clear if we want to go that route, what we can, how we
Maybe
can.
the CAO, my understanding is the applying for and getting the MRDT in motion is in our strategic plan.
Lisa, the last update.
Yeah, so that's, and I
It
think,
is separate and it's
yeah,
going along on its own in the
yeah, and I think
strategic.
it had a
Okay.
completion date of having all the work done by 2026, which means it would come into effect on January 1, 27.
Okay.
So can we vote on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Wade?
I said aye.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. You were muted. Okay,
Who seconded the motion? Thank you. I just speak to.
thank you. And this must be Ms. Roger Long.
Yes,
I'm with the newcomer guy.
sometimes I'm also a member of the CEC.
Thank you.
The Newcomer's Guide was first published in 2016 and has a number of the content within it has to do with for newcomers to the island that need to know important things like for anything from recycling to garbage to how to manage when firefighters are on the road with their flashing lights, ferry etiquette, a big section of the content. Here, social activities, community events, volunteering, arts and recreation opportunities. And the document itself is shared through the municipal hall and it's distributed fairly often with realtors. Obviously talking to new people interested in coming to the island. There is a line item within the budget for this year for 2024. For our subcommittee and myself and Brian will be here as well. Judy Reynolds and Jamie Schaefer, we worked on this over the last several months. And mostly we're reflecting changes to update the content to things that are still here. There's been some adjustments to links, things like Facebook accounts, and even changing a little bit of the content as well to emphasize some of the things that have happened over the last several years. The draft work was contracted out to the design and editing, as you can see up here. It has been put through into the first, maybe second draft. And they will be published, assuming approval of the motion, we would go to publishing both in print and online. It will still have to go through one more draft, so any other comments, a lot of anything from typos to grammar, etc., still has to be cleaned up. And then it has to be published both online, which will be slightly different than the print version of the document.
Any questions for the presenter? Councillor Fatt?
Thank you for this updating the contents and the can you tell me, were there, besides updating the content and as you've indicated, were there other shifts made in the content? And secondly, how many, I've got questions about the print version. How many were published in print and how do we need them in print?
So the content side of things, I would say that the titles or the bullet points of the different sections pretty much remain the same in what was covered. In the structure itself was pretty much the same. I would say we adjusted some of the strength of the content or the in-depth things like ferry and a few other things probably broadened out a little bit. But otherwise, so it was updates.
Okay, thank you. And about the print versions, how many are you thinking of printing and at what cost?
Yes. So it'll be a small number of runs because it'll be a digital print. Sorry, did we get the print costs?
I don't know the print costs, but I was just speaking with communication staff. We've printed less annual reports and parks plans, but this tends to be one that they're sort of unpacking boxes and perhaps just sort of want to put it on their fridge. So we might consider printing a few. And I believe we have actually stopped just giving them to the realtors and we will just give them a digital file they can print at their own cost. We just want it to be really accessible. So
okay, thank you. That's enough information. That answers my questions. Thanks everybody for getting it to this draft. It's good.
So the motion says, I went through and read it all the other night and Steph had one of my nice marked up.
yeah, we have a few of those.
Package. It says that council approved the second edition as amended. So are you
Meeting with the amendments that come from council.
rather than just, so what we're approving basically is approving in principle the newcomer guide as presented. Okay. We'll change the motion to say in principle as presented. I really liked the reformatting and all the pictures and everything. That was very good. So would somebody like to make the motion or should I do that? Any more questions? Okay, I'll move that council approve in principle the newcomer guide second edition update as presented. Second? Sure. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. I got you. Thank you, right? Thank you. Losing people. 10.3, recommendation of the community center joint community center staffing proposal. Okay, you're on.
Thank you, Chair and Council. It's a pleasure to present today on behalf of the Joint Management Committee, and I'll let my co-presenter introduce herself. Thanks. Hi, I'm Gail Lotenberg. All of you know Jillian, obviously, but maybe not me as well. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Hearth Arts Fund Bowen for many years now, and an active board member. I am the chair of the Performing Arts Committee of the Hearth Arts Fund Bowen, and I am one of the 2 representatives of the Hearth that sit on the Joint Management Committee for the Community Center. So this report before you today is for information for consideration in the 2025 budget, and has already been included in the draft budget as presented at the Committee of the Whole last month. So this staffing recommendation from the Joint Management Committee demonstrates the evolution of a long relationship between the Bowen Island Municipality and the Hearth Arts on Bowen, formerly known as the Bowen Island Arts Council. For over 20 years, we've worked together to support, initiate, and fund arts on Bowen Island, guided by the Cultural Master Plan, which was first adopted in 2004 and updated in 2017. The need for proper performance space on the island has persisted as an identified priority, and the efforts to bring this to fruition were undertaken in partnership over the years. This partnership has been apparent through the many committees and working groups over 20+ years, and articulated through the Memorandum of Understanding between BIM and the Hearth, which was updated in 2021 as the community center project starts to become a reality. So as the project progressed towards completion, both the municipality and the Hearth shifted from imagining its creation to planning for operations. So I'll turn it over to Gail to provide us an update on this at the Hearth.
Yeah, thank you. So through this extensive period of partnership, the Hearth Arts on Bowen has really undergone a number of changes. One, I would say, is board configuration. When I first joined the board, it was primarily a visual arts. The artists that were represented on the board were primarily visual artists. Now, I don't think we have any visual artists. They're all performing artists, plus members of the community who are specialists in areas like human resources and finance and other fundraising. So we've really seen a board configuration change to support the partnership. Also a shift in strategy where we've really broadened our purview to the new demands and opportunities of having a theater, both to program and to produce help present shows in. Finally, we created early in this partnership something called the PAC, or the Performing Arts Committee. And the Performing Arts Committee since 2022 is the one that has been leading a lot of the development of thinking around how we expand the focus of the Hearth Arts on Bowen to the performing arts. And finally, very recently, we created a new standing committee called the Fundraising Committee to help expand fundraising efforts. Though the Hearth has a long history of doing very successful fundraising through its mini gala,
raising somewhere from $17,000 to $19,000 a year. That's all done through the support of the visual arts community. And we now need to really direct a lot of energy towards fundraising for activities in the new theater.
So the mandate of the Joint Management Committee is to provide policy development and operational guidance to manage shared interests and use of the community center. The committee first developed the facility mission statement, several operational policies, and the rental rate structure, and these were all approved by council last year. Next, the committee turned our attention to staffing and realistic operations. In this phase, committee members identified elements of the facility that were the least familiar within the existing functions of the municipality and the hearth, and fell outside of existing job descriptions within either organization. So these two areas are performance and rental specifically. So this work is summarized in this spreadsheet that I know was somewhat of a challenge potentially to look at, but it shows, it's very comprehensive in this report, and it outlines specific tasks related to operations and who would be responsible for conducting each task. It notes which positions are currently existing within each organization and which would be new. And this spreadsheet represents months of discussion and analysis of operations through the different perspectives of committee members, and includes the input of essential non-committee members such as the CAO, the CFO, and the facility manager. You'll note that a marketing specialist is mentioned. This is a position at the hearth that has been expanded in 2025 to oversee marketing efforts related to the new theater, Bowen Theater, and the hearth is already committed to this budget and this annual budget increase. So the proposal being presented for consideration in this 2025 budget is for support for two half-time positions, a booking coordinator and a production and programming coordinator. And this has, as I said, it's already been included within the draft budget.
So our final rationale that we came to was the booking coordinator would be a position under the Bowen Island municipality within the Department of Recreation and Community Services, largely due to the complexity and security related with the new facility manager software. This position will also provide front desk service at the new facility. The business case for this position has already been presented to council January 20th. Whereas the production and programming coordinator is a new half-time position, which would be issued through the form of a contract and would be administered by the Hearth Arts on Bowen. And that person will be working closely with staff at the community center, and as a result would have access to a shared workstation in the new municipal offices to really coordinate efforts. The role of the production and programming coordinator will be to cultivate, attract, and support public arts presenters and events to the new theater, which is so critical to developing activity and energy, but also to developing revenue strategies. And that person will be overseeing grant applications, seeking out new partnerships, and will assist with the operations related to public access to and safety during performance events. We feel that the Hearth Arts on Bowen as a nonprofit is best suited outside of Bowen Island Municipality to oversee this contract for two reasons. The main is that the Hearth leverages the strength of this BIM Hearth partnership, but at the same time has the ability to serve as an advisory body as artists who are working in the field. There's a lot of expertise at the Hearth on how to create and oversee arts activities. And we also have, through the Performing Arts Committee, a skilled group of volunteers and a very large network of relationships off of Bowen and on Bowen, with agents, with performing artists, and with presenting organizations, both in Vancouver and nationally. As well, and really importantly, because Hearth is a nonprofit organization, it has access to grant funding for the arts, which the Bowen Island municipality would not have access to because of its standing.
Looking at some of the financial considerations of this, the booking coordinator is proposed to be within the Department of Recreation and Community Services. operational budget, while the funding for the production and programming coordinator proposed to be considered in the community grants budget for 2025 and 2026. By doing it for 2 years, we can consider this seed money while the position takes hold and during which time more grants are able to be applied for, funding coming in through performances, and the goal becoming that this position is more self-sustaining. We would have that opportunity to review that within this 2-year period. The Hearth has committed the $10,000 annual disbursement from an operating endowment fund held by the Bowen Island Community Foundation, has committed that towards this position as well. So the report outlines these costs for the positions, but what we didn't include in this section is the cost of not having these 2 positions. And there's a few significant ones, one being potentially substantially decreased revenue to the facility for the rentals. If we haven't the capacity to manage that, then we can't handle those renters and their needs. This would give the position, let me rephrase that. Leverage for the Hearth to say that we have municipal support in their grant applications would be decreased as a cost of not funding this. And there would be a significant decrease in programming for the community and access to the arts, which was essentially the driving force behind this facility in the first place. So in conclusion, the JMC, the Joint Management Committee, believes that these 2 positions are interlocking and they're crucial to the success of the facility. It strengthens the longstanding partnership between BIM and the Hearth and puts both organizations in a better position for future financial sustainability. Thank you.
Anybody in council have questions for the presenter?
Thanks. So I'm the guy who, earlier today and consistently over time has said, don't spend money on things that aren't Maslow's hierarchy needs kind of thing. I get that with the massive investment, both in time and money that this entire island has made to this place, we've got to make it succeed. And I think what you're suggesting is it can't succeed without this, and I believe that. I think without a professional person, in particular that role, that booking coordinator, like that's got to be done by somebody who knows what they're doing. So I in spite of everything else I've said about spending money, I am going to support this, but because of that, because it have to do it properly or don't do it at all, which goes back 10 years now. What I would ask, a question I have is I heard the word contract in there. So for this particular, are you asking that the municipality fund a contracted person in this role or fund an employee that's a contract employee, or if you see the difference in where I'm going? And what I'm really getting at is performance review, because it's going to be really easy to grade performance in this role. Nice use of the word performance in this context. That was accidental. So we'll be able to look each year, each 2 years, each 3 years, whatever it is, and say, we're filling it, we're not filling it, we're partially filling it, we're meeting our goals. There are going to be key performance indicators available to you. So how is that rule set up the way you're seeing it right now?
Through the chair, we are looking at that this is specifically, so you mentioned booking coordinator, but I think some of the actions you spoke about are more about the production and programming coordinator.
Yeah.
So, okay, just to be clear, so what the JMC is proposing is that through the community grants program, an allocation is made to the Hearth, and the Hearth manages that contract for a 2-year basis with a new employee that is managed by the Hearth. It would be really important, and this outlines in the report, I apologize for not mentioning it, that some of those key deliverables need to be defined by the Joint Management Committee and brought to council for approval so that we are able to have a very solid, mutually understood expectations for the position.
That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. And would this be, do you foresee this as a renewable yearly 2-year, 3-year contract? Or how do you see this?
I think the smartest thing would be to have a 1-year contract with option to renew so that we have an evaluation opportunity. As well, we really thought that for the limited amount of money there is for this very expansive role, we thought it would be the best use of money to not have an employee right off the bat, one that we would have a very long-term commitment to. If we did a contract, we could make it a 1 year with an option to renew for a second year. And we're not paying for as many expenses related from a human resources perspective as well. We don't have a long-term commitment to the individual.
That's great. Okay, thanks you guys.
Thank you.
Anybody have questions? Because I've got one. Go ahead.
It's not really a question, it's just thank you for the report, and I was glad to hear in your verbal report the word energy, because I think the programming aspect of this has to bring it to life, as Councillor Saunders said, or to light the spark, however you want to put it, and to build some want to be involved into the project. And having worked at a municipal facility myself for 7 years, I know how important this idea of getting things going and building excitement and drawing people in and having a community of participants and linking to different groups and stuff. I know how important that is. And I don't want to have a building sitting empty or just sort of chugging along. I think this sounds great to me and I'm in support. Thank you.
I have one question to do with the production and programming coordinator fund. You were talking about seed funding of 35,000 to the Hearth. And you're also saying the Hearth has committed 10,000 from an endowment fund. So am I to read from that the Hearth will be spending 45,000 on this contract?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to. And out of curiosity, how much money is in the endowment fund?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know the amount. I know what we get is the annual, what we receive from it on an annual disbursement is 10,000. So the full disbursement is going into.
Okay, so there's enough money in there to.
Yes.
To support 10,000 a year on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, because it's the community foundation.
So interest rates are going down. Yeah. Councillor Jurgensen and then Councillor Getty.
The chair, so Councillor Saunders already asked a lot of my questions around key performance indicators, but am I to understand that with the 1 year contract with option to renew, that would serve as the performance review period? So like we would do a review annually to see if the contract would be renewed and extended. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I think we could structure that the way that would work best. We haven't actually considered the exact timing of that yet, but maybe towards the latter part of the contract, that performance process could be ongoing throughout, actually. We wouldn't wait till the very end. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Getty, I think you had.
Well, I'm biased. I'm on this committee. And I just want to say that this is one of the hardest working committees I've ever worked with. And that everybody brings a lot of really good stuff to the table. So your oral presentation is fabulous. And yeah, thank you.
Would somebody move the motion and note that it's slightly different in your agenda package than it is on the on your agenda, printed agenda rather than in the package?
So which do we want?
You want to use the printed one, just to clarify that we're not physically approving the money.
I'd like to, if I may. The council received the recommendations of the Community Center Joint Management Committee in consideration of the proposed funding of a production and programming coordinator from community grants budget and a booking coordinator in the Department of Recreation and Community Service proposed in the draft 2025 to 29 5-year financial plan.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I empty the room, I've no idea.
Sorry, they don't hang out.
Okay, I'm up next on North Shore Standing Committee, 11.1. The North Shore Standing Committee's been around for many, many years, and its focus is on It's Standing Committee on Substance Use, largely drugs, but also alcohol. So what they're wanting to do right now, toxic drug deaths on the North Shore and Bowen Island and Lions Bay are all part of the North Shore, as well as the two North Vans and West Van. So it's a toxic drug awareness campaign to get some communications out in conjunction with Vancouver Coastal Health. They're basically going to design the message at preventing toxic drug deaths. And it's to prevent overdose and by alerting potential users to the presence of fentanyl in and widespread toxicity of all street drugs. And this isn't just a downtown east side issue. I've spoken with our fire chief, and both the ambulance service and the fire department have naloxone, and they have had to use it on both. So this is something that, you know, the people who use drugs on the island, their families and friends, this is something to help with them. So my motion is that council support in principle participating in the North Shore Standing Committee on Substance Use, Toxic Drug Awareness Campaign, and that staff liaise with the other North Shore communications staff on the project. And I would move that one. Were you seconding? Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? I didn't put this in the consent agenda because we wanted to raise at least the awareness of people watching. So all in favor?
Right.
Hi, thank you. All right. We are on to 11.2. Councilor Wade.
Okay. I attended the February 21st Metro Vancouver board meeting. On January 23rd, 2025, at the special Metro Vancouver Regional District Board meeting, the board passed a series of resolutions that directed staff to bring back a report with information on the external contributions identified to inform for the 2026 budget and 2026 to 2030 financial plan discussions. So the whole meeting was about these external funding that Metro is doing. And the contributions or programs identified are agricultural awareness grants, Coquitlam Watershed Roundtable, cultural grants, Fraser Basin Council, Pacific National Exhibition, Seymour Salmonoid Society, Sustainability Innovation Fund Regional District, Sustainability Innovation Fund Water, and Sustainability Innovation Fund Liquid Waste. The debate began with, there's clearly a contingent within the board that wants to find ways to save money. And they're suggesting that looking at some of these external grants is a way to save money. The strange thing is that the amount of money we're talking about here is minuscule. It comes down to, for all these programs, perhaps a couple of dollars per year per household in the tax requisition. The debate was very lively, and generally, thankfully, from my perspective, most of these were approved to be continued. The exception was the Fraser Basin Council, and it's a good example because the allocation is $300,000 a year, and that represents 25 cents per household per year. And to lose the Fraser Basin, we're not losing the Fraser Basin Council. They'll still be able to run their programs, but David Marshall, the chair of the board, has indicated that this is going to cause some strife for sure. And personally, I think it's a real shame because the Fraser Basin Council has been doing amazing work for decades, and I've been to a few of their events decades ago. But they were the ones that sort of just missed the mark, and so the others all got through. The staff did an amazing job of writing a huge report talking about the activities and the benefits of all these various organizations that I've mentioned, or programs I've mentioned. And I guess it fell on deaf ears with some board members. But if you want a little more information on sort of the nature of the debate with the board, there's an article in the Vancouver Sun from over the weekend talking about the Metro Vancouver, the cuts to programs by the board. So that was the whole meeting, 4 hours. Not a great use of my time, I thought, but I'm glad that we got a bunch of them approved. That's it.
I have a curiosity question. I don't know whether it was the articles I was reading in the paper, but I got the feeling that the reason the Fraser Basin Council thing was defeated or not approved was that they were directly passing that money on to IKEA.
Well, that was
IKEA was one of the companies they made grants to.
Well, it was to IKEA and one other company, but it was for a program that was providing electric vehicles. So it was the electric vehicle benefit, and the argument. I think it was Brad West that was making the argument that why are we, subsidizing a for-profit company? But this is all part of the amazing work that Metro Vancouver does, and I think this is clearly part of their role. Anyway, too bad.
Any questions on the Metro report? Okay, moving on, we have Islands Trust. One of you wants to go first.
Sure, I'll start. Thank you, Chair. This is an interesting Trust Council meeting coming up on March 11th to 13th. We'll be electing a new chair of the Islands Trust, Peter Luckham having stepped down, and we'll be hopefully adopting a budget as well. So you can see the Financial Planning Committee meeting that was held February 19th is in there. We had another meeting last week. I'm the chair of that committee now. So I'm catching up quickly. At last week's meeting, the Bowen the Bowen contribution went down by a few percentages, tiny amount. But the committee tried hard to recommend ways to lower the tax requisition for the Islands Trust, and mostly wasn't really able to do that. It was mostly revenue related, not adding costs. So that's part of what's going on. There's a reconciliation learning circle that I missed this morning because of a rescheduled meeting. There's a Islands Trust Conservancy newsletter that's out there in the lobby and also in our agenda, one of the information items. And Wednesday, this week, the 26th, 7 p.m. in the evening is a webinar about fire in the Islands Trust area, living with fire, more focused on the northern region, which includes Bowen. So people might want to tune in for that, about how to live in the new climate changing times that we're in and prevent or change the ways so that we can live without fire. Thank you. Oh, right. And then we've been having regular committees of the whole. This is new for the Islands Trust to discuss the trust policy statement amendment project. And Judy missed the last one, but they've sort of been happening like every week or two. The last one was during the daytime. We barely got quorum of 26 trustees because of course many trustees work or have other things going on. And these were all committees of the whole added later, so people had already had schedules. But changes are being recommended to Trust Council. So we'll see what happens at Trust Council when the process gets, we're working our way down through the most recent draft of the trust policy statement, which is like the OCP for all of the islands.
Is that going to be at the March Trust Council meeting?
I don't believe so.
The timeline is still further out.
Yeah, there's lots more to do.
Once we get through this, then there's public consultations and then it'll come up to, and we might do first reading first before it goes out, but we've got that step to go through as well.
And First Nations input is being accepted all the way through, as well as a special vote that has already happened.
I don't have much to add, except that while the Bowen Island allocation in the trust budget is very convoluted because we don't pay for any planning and we don't pay for any bylaw enforcement and we don't pay for any, actually, we don't end up paying for any of the litigation with respect to bylaws and planning. So one of the things that I asked the chief financial officer for the trust to do was on one of the charts that have all of the income and expenses to put an extra column in to indicate which ones Bowen contributed to. So that has been done. So in the, it's a massive agenda, 257 pages, I think it was. But in the last Financial Planning Committee meeting, on page 48 and 49 is the chart that has the column that's got the Bowen Island allocation. So one of the things that we always have trouble explaining is that because we are one entity that's sharing only a partial list, it turns out that our allocation looks and the number is actually quite a bit bigger than the overall. So that's the issue that we're going to have to be able to explain to residents here. But we had a slight decrease going into that meeting, and we haven't seen the results of all of the discussion. It was a very interesting process because we went through every single item in the budget, and if anybody wanted to discuss it to see whether or not it should continue or should be dropped or should be changed somehow, we discussed all of those topics, and it was very, very helpful. I thought that process was everybody thought deeply in terms of what was being allocated and what was a reasonable expense or not.
Did she share a schedule that showed percentages of taxable assessed values or for all the islands? Is that in the agenda package or was it? It used to be in the agenda package.
It was in this time, and the agenda is it's under 11.3. It's linked to there. There aren't as many tables as the previous agendas.
That table hasn't been in for a couple of years.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just interesting to see how our assessed value percentage changes in relation to the others. And I think there was a statement in the report that our assessed value percentage had gone up relative to the others on the basis of the preliminary roll. Yeah. I'll email her and ask for it. Okay, anybody else, any questions? Where are we at? We are down to question period. Nobody in the audience? Okay, you can.
We outlasted them.
Second. All right.
You want a 5-minute stretch? It's quarter